morning, everyone. I'm Christina Rennick. I'm a committee member of Central Safety Group, and welcome to our session, our event this morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians who've looked after the lands and the waterways around where we meet today. We're meeting on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and people, if you can think about the people, the traditional owners of the land where you're meeting today. I extend our respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today, if we have anyone with us. Welcome everyone to Central Safety Group's November event. We're pleased to announce that our annual networking lunch has been set for Friday the 15th of December. It will include a 3-course Middle Eastern feast at Mama's Canteen in Federation Square. A notice will be sent out this week regarding that, but you can already go to the events section of Central Safety Group website to book your place. For anyone who's been to our Christmas luncheons before, they're a fabulous networking event and a great way to catch up with people. We also have with us today Barry Naismith. If I just turn that around, Barry can wave to everyone. Hi, Barry. Barry's here today. He's just completed his new work, 150-year history of OHS in Victoria, 1873 to 2023. We'll be sharing that with financial members on our website. For those who attended the 60-year reunion or 60-year anniversary lunch last year, you'll recall Barry speaking about this work. And now we will have access to it on our website, which is fabulous. So thank you very much, Barry, for all of that work. Housekeeping for today, if people can please remain on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, use the chat function and I'll try and we'll try and insert those in. And there'll also be time after the presentation for questions. So now to start our November event, I'd like to introduce Marilyn Hubner, who will be talking about recent OHS research results. So Dr. Hubner has been developing and delivering safety training programs for over 20 years. She was appointed OHS Body of Knowledge Manager with the AIHS in January this year, as well as running her own consultancy business for health and safety. Marilyn's background includes Managing Director of Build Up Research and 8 years as National Research and Training Support Coordinator for the National Safety Council of Australia. Marilyn's completed her PhD thesis titled Constructing Safety Training, Foundations of Attitudes and Perceptions of the Construction Site Supervisor. We welcome Marilyn to speak with us today, and we'll switch over to her now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome, and thank you for those in the room and for those that are listening online. So as you just heard, I have taken over from Pam Pryor, who's a member of this group, and I would like to take this public opportunity, as I missed in the recent College of Fellows town hall meeting. I'll take this opportunity to publicly thank Pam for her service to the body of knowledge. She came up with the idea, she developed it, the money came in, and she's worked diligently on it, and it is by far one of her finest pieces of well, it will be her legacy. It is her legacy, and I am honoured to take this position on and continue on in her shoes. You will be happy to know that Pam is, I guess, acting as my mentor in this role, so she hasn't stepped away from it completely. She has always given me as much time as I need. So thank you, Pam, if you're listening, and even if you're not. So I'm here today to talk about what's sort of, I guess, what's happening in the research space, and Because I haven't been to a Central Safety Group networking event yet, I don't really understand the audience. I'm not really sure where you're coming from. So I took it upon myself to think about the fact that we might be practitioners or professionals or practitioners in our workplace, and that we might not have access to the theoretical knowledge that's coming out in the research journals and that. I'm not as heavily involved in research currently as the way Pam was when she was sort of, I guess, editing and sub-editing and writing some of the BoK chapters. So it'll take me a few years to get into that space. But what I've done is I've picked out some of the research that has come across my view in the work that I do, and hoping that's going to sort of fit in with most people. But we can always change the topics next time depending on what the audience is like. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about some research that's come out of the construction industry, some training aspects of safety training, working from home, some research on the hazards of that. I'm going to talk about the Centre of Research New South Wales, OHS Radar, which some of you might know about. And then I just pulled a piece about harmonious safety passion, that I think is a term that we all should start using. But because we're doing this virtually as well as meeting face to face, I just pulled a little bit of an older piece of research that perhaps is not empirical as we might want it to be, but some Microsoft research way back in 2021 said that our brains actually need a break between meetings. Now that's not groundbreaking, but what they actually did is they put people in meetings, in back-to-back meetings for 4 hours, 6 hours and 8 hours, and they had all the neurological things on it, and they took pictures of the brains, and then they had a control group that didn't do any meetings, and then they had people that were taking breaks between meetings. And so in that piece of research that you can find, you can Google that and find it online. It's out of Microsoft Work Lab. It's pretty easy to find. It's got some great pictures of the brain, and it shows periods where the brain actually spikes when you're transitioning between meetings. So I'm sure some of you have had back-to-back meetings virtually in these past few years. And that period where you click leave on one and then try and link up to another one, the stress levels actually spike in the brain. So I encourage you all to take breaks between meetings as much as you can. So anyway, that's a little bit of research just to start. All right, on to the more serious and more formal empirical and evidence-based research. So there is around the world globally, there's a lot of journals that sort of cover safety, cover occupational health and safety, the health aspects, the occupational therapy aspects, the medical aspects. It's a whole lot of it, but I've focused for this talk just on the journal Safety Science, which is one of probably the biggest ones that we use. So all of these articles that I'm talking about are all from 2023 out of Safety Science. The people in the room have received a USB with all the research on it. So if you're lucky, you might be able to ask me and I might be able to send this stuff to you if you don't have access to it yourself. But okay, the first one that I thought that might be interesting is a little bit of research out of the University of Colorado, where they were looking at the blame culture in the construction industry around incidents. And so they looked at the blame culture. They looked at organisations that had better safety culture and were running with a just culture ideology. And what they actually found, they found something a little bit interesting within the research, and they called it the new blame. All right, so we've got the blame culture, but this is the new blame. And what it actually was is that these companies that are so in tune to not blame the person, you know, so we don't want to blame the person anymore. We want to blame the system or the equipment or something along those lines. Well, what they actually found is that the investigators who had this thinking in their head were not looking at all at the human factors and were only looking at the inanimate objects and the systems. So they call this bias, I guess you could call it, they call it new blame. And it sort of directed people away from looking at the whole aspect of an incident. You know, the research is pretty solid research. They used quite a number of companies and looked at quite a number of incident investigations. But I think the takeaway from that is for in our organisations, when we are looking towards that just culture, what we need to do is we need to look at our policies and procedures, and we need to think about how our investigators are trained and look at that language that they're using. You know, are they actually putting in some bias away from people? Some of our organisations might not have a just culture and we still might be reactive. So we might be looking still for that blame culture that we have onto people. So we really need to think about the not only the way that we you know, physically carry out the investigations, but the language we use within them. Right? So the investigators' language, but also the language around our policies and procedures according to that. So the next one, a little bit closer to home, RMIT, Helen Lingard and her pals. Helen's on a couple of committees with me, so I'm not allowed to say anything bad about her.
She was our speaker last month, and she's fantastic.
Look, she is fantastic. And did she happen to talk about her safety performance index?
No, I don't recall.
No? Okay, so this is actually new. This, if I'd done this a couple of months ago when I was supposed to, this slide wouldn't have been here. But the construction centre has just, and I mean just October, late October, published this article on their development of evidence-informed health and safety performance. It focused on the rail industry, so they work with the rail industry, but of course it certainly is across the whole board. Anytime you have projects, I think this will type work. Now, I have not read the entire paper. It is about 80 pages long. You can access it through RMIT's website. It's freely available for it, but it does talk about the use of leading and lagging indicators and what people within the industry find the most useful. Of course, everybody in the results, they talk about that lagging is, we don't want to have lagging indicators, it's rear view, it's reactive, all of that type of stuff, but everybody wants them. All the clients in construction want lagging indicators, the government wants lagging indicators. That's how we work. We've got to roll with it. Although watch this space, because I think there's a whole lot of stuff coming out into the new year that will hopefully move our brains away from that thinking. The paper talks about, the whole report talks about the importance of collecting and analysing the leading indicator data, looking at specific types of incidents and how the practitioners and professionals can use that in a way. So I think at this stage it would be great for us to be able to say there's a whole heap of research that shows that lagging indicators are terrible. They don't show anything, and they certainly don't improve performance in any way, shape or form. But then there's also a lot of research out there that's saying that leading indicators don't actually automatically mean improved safety performance either. So I know that the Body of Knowledge and some other groups of people are working on this, so watch this space for a little bit more. In the meantime, I think you should have a look at your indicators, what you are using to identify safety and health performance in your organisations, and just consider that balance of leading and lagging. And of course, I guess more topical on that, some leading indicators around psychosocial hazards and performance in your workplace as well. Don't forget about that. Okay, still with the construction industry now. This one is about situational awareness. So again, situational awareness is pretty important in lots of other industries as well. So that's why I think it can be merged across. This research was out of New Zealand and Singapore. there's a whole lot of collaborative research going on now. It's very rare actually that I find papers written by just one university. It's like really collaborative, which is great. Anyway, so what in this study, what they did was use a whole range of different digital technologies to see if they can, I guess, find the best way to improve a worker's situational awareness. The range of technologies, I'll just go to this slide so I can see them a little bit better. So in this research, which spanned quite a lot and quite a large range of people, they looked at lots of different things. So you can imagine within a construction project, there's lots of different situations. So they were trying to test as many as they can. So using a whole range of digital technologies, you know, so health-related stuff like heart rate monitors, wearable technologies, eye tracking in vehicles, pedestrian and plant interaction sensors, all of these different types of things. So, and I guess what they tried to do, or what they did, was take all of the data from all of these different types of things and then synthesize it all together and then moved forward to a model. Right? Now, this is a little bit different because I guess in our workplaces, we don't often put a whole lot of technology in at one time. We just put maybe one and we trial it and we collect the data and move forward. But this research, I'll go back to this one, this research sort of actually said that the dynamics and the differences between the different technologies actually enabled the management to look at a better way to enhance situational awareness in workers. So really, really interesting, very convoluted and scientific way of doing the research though. It's a very difficult read for those that are not, I guess, in the academic sphere. So I think the takeaway from that, and if you are looking at that particular research, you can look at the, you know, the abstract at the front and then the findings at the back to really see things. But what it's really, I think the big thing out of this paper is that safety professionals need to look at a wider scope when they're looking to improve things like situational awareness or particular, you know, hazard related things. So instead of maybe just using one digital technology, see what else the company has got. Is the company using, what other types of digital technology is the company using across its sphere for operations, for finance, for all those things, and see if you can incorporate that data together to improve the safety outcomes. So that was a pretty big, it's a big report as well. It's difficult to read, but I think it's worthwhile if you can push it out. Okay, so moving on out of construction into, I guess, my sphere of space, which is more the education and the training of safety. There's a lot of research around training effectiveness and ineffectiveness. Actually, there's more about training ineffectiveness than there is about effectiveness. But there's a very, very small amount of research about safety training and its effectiveness. So anyway, this graphic here is, I just wanted to show you how, I guess, complex the field is. You know, sometimes we look at safety training and it's just something that we just blurt out every morning at an induction or do manual handling training or something along those lines. And it's very simple. It comes easily to us as, you know, subject matter experts, I guess. We know what the problems are, we know how to fix them, we know what the policy is. But there's a whole lot of other stuff in safety training. And I think mostly, you know, scouting right back to my PhD and still in my thinking and in my experience today is that we really miss the opportunity for real learning in our safety trainings because we treat it a little bit too much like compliance. But anyway, that's my little rant. But anyway, whole lot of things here. So first bit of research to talk about is a systematic review. I'm sorry, I cannot remember where this came out of. I want to say out of the US because lots of the systematic reviews on training do come out of there. But actually, if you went and put systematic review of training into a Google search, there's so many systematic reviews because that's what seems to come up a lot. This one looked at the growing use of technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, and again, a systematic review. It gathers all the literature that's out there, and then uses a very small scope to go. We only want to look at this one, this one, this one. But essentially, these types of immersive technologies, what this systematic review said is these types of technologies are getting easier to use, are getting cheaper to use, are getting easier for organisations to span across their whole network, not just on safety, but across the whole network, and that they have great potential, not that they are, but they have great potential to make for effective safety training and education. Okay, so I'm sure that some of you are probably using things like augmented reality or VR, other types of immersive technologies, but they don't always work. There's lots of papers out there that say that they're not any good. But then, of course, there's lots of papers out there that say that they're good as well. So I think that we need to run with technology. I think that as professionals, we can't be stuck in the past. I think COVID showed us that people can learn technology quickly when they need to. So I would strongly advocate for the fact that we need to consider different types of technology when we're looking at the way that we educate or we train our staff. And that's in safety, but it's also in every other thing, like HR, in any type of policy or anything along those lines. So that's a systematic review. More specifically, there's some interesting things around just to run with some of these immersive technologies. There's a paper out of Turkey, which is interesting, but there's underground mines in Turkey. I didn't know that, but anyway, it shows how naive I am to the geology of the world, I guess. But anyway, so I guess often in the past, over the past 10 years, when we've been having these sort of game-based things happening in our workplaces and in training, we've looked at them as fun. You know, the games are fun. And even as a trainer, it's like, oh, put a game in because it's fun. You know, like people enjoy it. We don't want boring training, we want fun training, you know. So they've been using games for fun. This study turned that around and they developed a virtual reality game that they called a serious game. But looking at their photos, it's not really a game, it's more of a scenario-based aspect of the workplace. So it's more of a step-by-step of the workplace as it came through. But they called it a game, a serious game, and essentially, like some of the things that have come out of Australia, where we've got a virtual workplace where you can learn how to do things, so process-based tasks or activities where you learn to do that without actually having to turn the button and blow something up. So they found that in this research, it was effective. It did, I think for me, it posed the question and I guess more deeply made me think about the fact of why we use games. So if you are training and you are using games or some other type of fun engagement, you need to think about the purpose of that. You know, does it have the purpose that runs along and links in with the training that you're doing at that time? So that was one out of Turkey. And then another one, which was about serious games, is out of France. I've just returned from France, so if you haven't been there, I strongly recommend going. The Olympics are on there next year, so it might give you a good reason to go. Or not, perhaps. The Mayor of France actually, you know, completely off track, but the Mayor of France has promised that Notre Dame will be ready for people to go inside by next year. I've just seen it. I don't think that's true. I don't think you'll be able to go in it next year. So if that's your reason to go to France or to Paris, no. Anyway, so this research again was looking at, I guess, another serious game. So this was in lab safety. So it looked at using virtual reality technology in a lab environment, which I think is perfectly fine. I think that lab safety, if you think about it, is quite critical in lots of different organisations and situations. So anytime you can take the danger away from people that are learning and do it in a way that's quite close to reality, I think is very good. These guys did run with the premise that older people would have more problems with the technology than younger people. And of course, if that's the idea that they went in thinking, of course, that's the result that they came up with. Interestingly enough, they said that people aged 50 and above had problems with the technology. So as opposed to the people that were below 30. Now, they're the two age groups that are in this. I'm not sure what happened between 30 and 50. Maybe they just forgot that age group or cohort of people. Anyway, the people that were involved in it, they did find that it was more engaging. They found that the VR training was more engaging. The one problem that I have with this particular paper is that the methodology for this was that they put the participants through a lecture, so a traditional lecture of lab safety first, and then they gave them the VR technology. So they didn't split it into a control group and this group and that group. No, they gave the traditional boring lecture first and then gave them a more exciting VR version. So of course it's a little bit biased in that particular sense. Yeah. Interestingly enough, on that age group is that they said that not so much that the people over 50 had problems with getting through the technology part of it, like I guess clipping or pressing buttons, but they had more problems with the headset that they were using. So like a VR headset on your face. So I'm not sure if that really relates to the type of training or whether it was just the hardware that they were using in particular ways. Just to show you some pictures on this, if you wanted to see some pictures, this is one of the things I love about academia is how they want to show their results. And these are the graphs that they use to show the VR results. Now, in my thinking, I would have pictures of the people using it and stuff like that. Maybe that's, they're going to use that for the marketing part of it, but this is what they come up with. So I think that, again, from a perspective of the professional, the practitioner in the workplace, it's important to really understand your audience, understand the people that you're giving or developing training for, and perhaps even including them in the decisions about what type of technologies to use. There's just like we have other types of stigmas in the workplace around different things like mental health, there's stigmas around technology as well, about how difficult it is or how uncomfortable it is or things like that. So it's just something that we need to probably try and consider before we just start, whacking in some technology. So that is that one. Now, away from technology a little bit, another one out of France, a little bit of a French theme happening here. But this one was completely different. This is about mindfulness training. So in this research, they put some Navy pilots through mindfulness training, and they had a control group and they had the participants in the study. So they developed this program, this mindfulness program in-house, so very, very relevant to the activities that the pilots were doing and the situations and environments. It was an integrated program. It wasn't just all about breathing and thinking about who you are. But it was a fairly decent program put together, you know, something that you would expect, like I guess a mindfulness retreat if you went off on a yoga and mindfulness retreat, you know, paying thousands of dollars for that. So really well thought out and well developed program. And they put their pilots through it. And unfortunately, in most of the places where they were looking for change, they found no change. There was no change between a pilot that did the mindfulness training and a pilot that didn't do the mindfulness training, except in this sort of decision-making, I guess, process in critical situations. So they found, and I'm not sure how they tested the critical situations, perhaps in a you know, a flight simulator. They didn't actually say that, or I didn't read it, that's probably more to the point. But they did say that the pilots who participated in the mindfulness reacted about 10 seconds faster in a critical situation than the people that hadn't had mindfulness training. Now, I would think that 10 seconds in a critical situation is a very big space of time to react. So I'm not 100% on this research. It did come across as being a little bit biased, but they did say up front that mostly it didn't work. But I guess it's something that we could think about as safety professionals. I'm not going to advocate that we should all put in mindfulness programs in our workplace. But what I think is more to the point here is that a long-term education program on something is probably going to be more worthwhile than perhaps a shorter one in some situations, because not in those just compliance-based things that we have to do, but if you're thinking about, you know, changing a culture or changing the behaviour, you know, you might want to consider these long-term structured and develop in-house types of programs. So that's what I got out of that piece of research. So just check the time there, so I'm not getting too bad. Okay. So moving away from training, and I can see that there's some things in the chat there, but I can't see the chat, so we'll wait for a little bit later if that's okay. So this next one it sort of came across my table in a different way, actually. I wasn't looking for it, it just sort of popped up in something. So this is out of Indonesia, and it's a study about actually the musculoskeletal injuries that are happening in a particular university. And the thing that I found the most interesting is that not only did they look at staff members, which is what we would all be doing if we were the university safety people, we would be looking at staff members, but they also put the students into their research as well. So they looked at how the students were reacting to being at home and using technology at home, like computers and phones and things like that. So there are a few different, the paper is a little bit all over the place, actually. So I don't think that they were, I don't think they went into the research with any idea of what they would find. They just sort of went, oh, let's do some things here, which I think is the best type of research. I like it like that. But what they found is that the complaints, so the injuries and the pain and things like that, were coming from people over the age of 25. Now, again, ages are really funny because, you know, somebody could be 65 and as fit as a fiddle, and someone can be 25 and have a terrible back or terrible shoulders, or, you know, so I think it's very difficult in that sense. But I also think from a musculoskeletal perspective is that there could be some, the word escapes me, some scaffolding of the problem. You know, as you get older, the more pain is caused because of the longer term of, you know, using your thumbs for texting or being constantly on the phone at home and things, on the computer at home in a situation where you don't have a an OT to come in and set your desk up and your chair up, and you could be, you know, like I'm sure some of you working from home or working from your bed or your kitchen table or, you know, things like that. So I think it's an interesting thing to look at that time period for these types of complaints. But they did specifically look at mobile phones and tablets. So I imagine in this particular case, there was a lot more using of a tablet and a phone for working than there was using a laptop. That could be a location situation there based in Indonesia. But for what they found is that women had complaints around their thumb usage, so for texting, and men had problems with their index fingers because they were either using a pen on the tablet or using their fingers on the tablet. So, you know, I guess it was fairly expected results when you go looking for complaints like that. I mean, you know, you're surveying people to say what type of complaints, and you give them a list. That's you're sort of asking for those types of responses. But I think that what we need to do, and because many people are still working with that flexible work from home and splitting between the office and at home, is we need to consider how our workers might be using the technology. And I know from a government perspective, you know, during COVID, it was take a picture of your workplace and send it to the safety person and then ticked off on it. But you know, it's a little bit like an audit. It's just a one moment in time. Are they continuing to work like that? So I think it's something that we need to consider as a potential influence of injuries moving towards a future when we look at this long-term work from home or flexible working hours. It's probably, we've been more concerned about the psychosocial impact of the working from home side of things, but we also need to consider that physical aspect as well. So I personally haven't heard of anybody that has put in an injury claim for being at home when they've been at home, but I'm sure that's happening. I'm sure it's happened, and I think it's something that professionals and our insurance coverers and our return to work people need to really consider about, you know, not only the operational side and the psychosocial side, but really how they're using that technology at home. You know, what type of expectations do we have on them for using these things, for using the technology at home? So something to think about there, and links into the OHS BoK chapter on working from home that Pam wrote in 2020. Okay, so the next one, and this is not really a piece of research, but this is where you can get some information that is research. So the Centre for Work Health and Safety in New South Wales, which is funded by the government up there, fantastic research. They fund research, they undertake research, really great centre with a whole lot of great researchers and communicators up there. So what they really try and do is when they fund research, they work with the researchers to ensure that the communication of that research is coming out in a way that we can all understand it. So you're not just having to read a journal article that's got all the methodology and research and that in it. You're getting what you really need to make change in your workplaces. So they publish a report twice a year. The next one is due out relatively soon because this year's one was out in April. But given that the centre is working really, has been working to get the World Congress up and running, it might be a bit later, so they might not put one out until late December or something along those lines. But it's definitely coming out. You can go onto the centre's website page and just put in your email address and they send it directly to you. You don't have to go looking for it, they'll send it to you. So it really does provide an avenue for professionals and practitioners in the workplace to link in with researchers. And their researchers are always looking for workplaces to conduct research in, you know, so it's a really good linkage. If you have a problem, you can talk to them about it and they might try and find a way to get a researcher into your organisation. So the April report, which, I mean, you can look it up yourselves, of course, but the April report, I just look at my notes here. It showed some things that financial pressures were still being felt across all industries, and then that was causing a barrier to safety, right? So companies, you know, the more pressure they are under financially, the less likely they are to invest or improve on safety aspects. What's linked in with the national radar, sorry, I should have said this earlier, but what the national radar is the research radar. So they publish the report. But what they also do is they have a national health and safety survey that if you register, you can do the survey. And then they link the survey data in with the research. So it's really, really practical stuff. I guess still of note, going back to April's report, there's a concerning volume of psychosocial harm being experienced in the workplaces, with burnout and harassment being the top two components of that harm or sources of that harm. I just did I just took a training workshop with Tessa Bailey, Dr. Tessa Bailey, yesterday about the psychosocial hazards and risk assessments and things like that. And yeah, she was getting quite concerned about burnout, saying that the burnout is actually you know, getting up close to the depression and anxiety numbers that we've been looking at over the past few years. So whether it's just another name for stress, they've given it a term burnout or not, but it's definitely making its mark. So it's something that you might be hearing in your workplaces, is that term burnout as being a psychosocial hazard nowadays. So okay, so they're also, I guess on the flip side of that, so the flexible working arrangements has increased since everyone's come back from COVID, and people are reporting that there's more flexibility in their workplace. It's a little bit obvious, I guess, to say that. But it's seeing benefits for workers' mental health, but then it's also seeing the negatives. So things like isolation, and I did actually read something that's not published yet, but where they looked at as the isolation aspect of bullying, where managers were purposely not sending information to their workers because they were so isolated and the workers weren't there. So definitely something that we need to think about in that space. And then from the regulators' side of things, they're strengthening their approaches to the newer areas of concern. So things like AI, electric vehicles, and the use of other types of technologies. Interesting, I was at a regulators roundtable not that long ago, and they were all talking about professional athletes as well. So I guess watch that space to see what that might come out of it. But I guess if you have places like here in Victoria, the county court that's getting fined for bullying and harassment, I can't see why you wouldn't have sports organisations so having the same type of thing. So strongly encourage you all to have a look at the Centre for Work Health and Safety.
Just a couple more minutes.
Yep, a couple more minutes, great, because I only really have one more to go. Now, harmonious safety passion. Now, when I first read this paper, I thought, oh, this is just obvious. It's just blatantly obvious. But what these researchers out of China, with they did some research with Chinese airline pilots, and basically the research said was that the more the pilots enjoyed their work, the safer that they were when they were flying. Now, I guess we've been saying that for a long time as safety professionals. You know, if you're happy at work, then you're gonna, you know, that's gonna flow onto your behaviour. But I guess now we have some actually hard evidence to say that it's real. But anyway, I like the fact that they use this harmonious safety passion. So they use the word passion. You don't often hear the word passion coming out of China, but it did come out of this university. And I think when I talk about my passion for safety, I guess I've never really thought about it as being harmonious, you know, because I've thought about it as being individual. It's my passion. But I guess it's sort of infectious. It's if I'm happy and I'm passionate about something and I'm working with you a lot, then you might get passionate about it and you might be happier, and then we're going to have this more harmonious relationship, you know. So I think that that's what they try to do. They use some, you know, specific transformational leadership training and some other transformational leadership resources for their pilots, and it came up that they were happier, the pilots were happier. So my takeaway for this is be happy, be passionate about safety, and maybe that's going to change your behaviour. So think about that. Thank you.
Marilyn, thank you very much. That was great. What we're going to do now is open up for some questions, or if people want to just have a chat and comment about some of those pieces of research and things that you've seen and found, doesn't have to be a question. If we can ask the people online to put their hand up, and maybe the same with the people in the room, and just introduce yourself first, who you are, before you launch into your question or comment that you'd like to make. And it would be great if you're online, if you could pop your camera on if you want to talk, so people can see who we're talking to. It's easier to listen to a face than a name on the screen. So we've got a couple of things in the chat. Oh, Gavin, did you have something you wanted to talk about? I can see you popped a link in the chat about evaluating the effectiveness of virtual reality for safety relevant training, a systematic review. Oh, is that the one you were talking about?
I think it might have been, yeah.
Marilyn's already popped it in. Is Gavin, are you still online? No, is someone using Gavin's login? No, it looks like he might have popped off. Who's put this one, agree often the...
That's Gavin as well.
Oh, Gavin said agree often the concept of learning gets lost. It is about ticking boxes and not actually engaging and learning something. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that compliance-based learning, and with the online learning, it's really gone into a lot of compliance-based tick the box. You've done your learning. Yeah. Has anyone
actually, honestly, I don't know what's worse, is just clicking through a screen for compliance training, or listening and watching a PowerPoint and somebody
yakking away.
I mean, both can be improved dramatically and improve the happiness of your workers.
I just did the annual induction online training at one of my workplaces, and it's virtually the same thing. You know, every year they update a few little bits and pieces, and I usually make sure I just double check where's the evacuation assembly point, you know, so that's about anything I really need to know. And usually there are questions at the end, and that tests me, you know, what have I remembered from the previous years, and that's all right. They've changed it. All you have to do now is you tick to say you agree that you have responsibility in the workplace, and you tick that you abide by, you know, drug and alcohol safety policy or something like that. Tick. That's it.
Interesting.
So you can just scroll through the whole thing, go tick, 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 yes, and they reckon that's you're inducted.
I'm actually doing some training. I haven't started it yet, but I got my login this morning actually to do some adaptive learning or content development. So Area 9, I don't know if I'm allowed to say people's names like marketing, but Area 9, they've got this adaptive learning program called Rhapsody. And some of the big players are using it in construction, you know, like your I can't think of any of those names, but the big players in the rail alliances. But what this does is really good for compliance-based training once everyone gets into it, is that it asks the participant what they know about the topic. So you get to say whether you're a beginner right through to being proficient. And if you tick proficient, that you know it because it's the same every year, it'll just test you. And you just answer the questions and then you finish the training. So instead of taking 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to do your compliance-based training, it just takes you 10 minutes because you say you're proficient, it tests you. But if you say you're proficient and you get the questions wrong, it'll send you back to that point, and it you know, it moves you along the training.
Sounds brilliant.
So it gauges your knowledge and allows you to move forward. So
we got any hands up? No. So I work in health, and I'm interested in the use of virtual reality for some education training in the occupational violence and aggression sphere. And I know that the Victorian Ambulance have been using it for a while, and I've done a couple of their virtual reality scenarios, and may I say it's absolutely stayed with me now. And I just see it as a fabulous way of people having an experience where they can be safe in that experience, but go back and do it again and practice, and what could I do differently, and actually get to do it again differently, and looking at their behaviour and changing their behaviour, and you know what the outcome might be if they did it differently. I think it's a really exciting way for us to move forward with that. And I know that Western Health are doing some work on virtual reality. I can see that Matt Casey from Eastern Health's on the online as well, and I'm not quite sure if they're looking at anything or have been thinking about anything around that as well. And I think we're going to delve a little bit. There's a health forum coming up, and I think we're going to have a look at what Western Health are doing in that sphere.
I think the technology with VR and probably more augmented reality is only going to get better. And instead of having to put a set of goggles or glasses on and then it's only your eyes that are immersed in it, is you will soon be able to walk into a room and the room will be the virtual reality room. And you will be your own person, and then people, you know, I think aggression training, anytime you take the source of harm away from people, it's better. So
I'm thinking Star Trek holodeck stuff.
Well, I don't think that's too far away. I honestly don't
fabulous.
think that is too far away, and some of the things that are out there. The old way we used to do aggression training was with actors, you know, with TV actors, and they would come at you and you would have to stop and do things like that, and it stressed you. Like if we had some neurological training then, I'm sure we'd be having some spikes. But that's how I used to do it, and they used to video your reactions, talk about your reactions, and you would improve, and then you would go and do it again. But you know,
the ambulance one's all about coming into the environment and how you scan and use the information about what you see. And it was interesting, those who went straight down the hall of the house and didn't look in the rooms missed people and things that were happening in the side, and then were really surprised at the end when something exploded. And there's
some training that the Level Crossings Removal Authority put together for SWORK, which is Safe Working in the Rail Corridor, for those that don't know. They have a VR element of that training, and it puts you on a live track, and a train goes past you on that live track to give you an understanding of what it feels like. And it's
it's so hard to get that experience anyway.
In Singapore, at one of the construction training centres, they have a scaffold VR experiment, and it's a bit, you step into what looks like a scaffold, but it's really just a picture of a scaffold. You have the glasses, then you put the glasses on, and then you're working, and so the supervisor tells you to point and push, and then the scaffold falls and you fall. But you don't fall, like you're still on the platform, but the noise sounds like that you're falling, and the vision of the cameras or the vision is moving, and then you hit the ground. And I've watched people, I've done it myself, I've watched people, and the people that
that would be
going into that
is motion
is
sickness.
amazing. So yeah, and
that is the one thing, the
problems.
motion sickness.
Yes, there are some issues with that for some people, and but it's only getting better. So.
I think there's it's something that will continue to evolve, and we need to continue to research it. And I'm also aware that it's 1 o'clock, which is kind of the end of our time, so we might just hang around and keep the cameras on, and if we want to continue chatting for a few more minutes. But I'd like to thank Marilyn very much for bringing to us some of the really latest research that's available and around, which is fabulous. Thank you. And to everyone who's participated. The recording of the event will be available to financial members on the website. For those in the room, thank you, Marilyn, for the additional information on the stick. There is always sometimes a little surprise for people who turn up. Our next event is Friday, the 15th of December, which is the annual networking lunch, and I really encourage people to attend that. So as our final kind of education event for the year, I would like to sign off and thank all our presenters and everyone who's attended for the year, and Central Safety Group Committee for organising these events. Thank you very much. See you all at the networking lunch.